You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Kay from Ross Kay Realty Consultants.
Thanks for having me, Jim, and I hope this finds you well.
The CMHC has released numbers claiming that foreign ownership of condos in Toronto and Vancouver is still very low, nothing to worry about. But what I wonder is, how real are these numbers? They say for Vancouver it's 5.4%, Toronto 5.8% foreign ownership, and that's up about 1%, 2% in some places since last year. Now, are those numbers real, and do they mean anything?
Well, I think CMHC is structuring things today to try to legitimize their market intelligence. CMHC is basically a data collection business that you could run out of your backyard, out of your garage, if you so desire. This is my opinion. Historically, they have had some legitimate research they've completed themselves, but over the last 10 years, they have simply become a talking mouth for the real estate associations across Canada and the builders associations across Canada. Sadly for the builders, CMHC has not represented them in the proper way, and that's led to a drastic slowing of their business models. But for realtors, CMHC has actually helped them sell more homes, actually sell the same number of homes. But at the same time, it's allowed the Canadian Real Estate Association's membership to swell to historical proportions, even though there are no sales for all those new members to take. So this article that was released today, yesterday, it's the second publication from the Housing Market Insight. That's the publication CMHC has identified them on. The first one they issued was middle of last month, and it had to do with the real estate market in it. So I can tell you, Jim, that we made a formal request for CMHC to remove that Housing Market Insight in reference to Edmonton CMA from their website. It is so flawed. It is so misrepresentative. It is so just outrageous in what they're attempting to say in that insight that we believe as a government body that should be removed. I'm also going to tell you the one we're going to talk about today about foreign buyers. We will be issuing a letter to formal request to CMHC later today for them to remove that report from their website. And we also would like to see CMHC issue a retraction on both of those insights so that the press is aware of what's going on. We know that's not going to happen, but I want you to have it on record here that we have made these formal requests. What CMHC's report did, Housing Market Insight about foreign buyers, they referenced the reason behind them launching this report was a comment from Sotheby's International, a report from Sotheby's International, the real estate brand franchising company. Let me stress, it is not a real estate company, never has been, never will be. It is simply a franchise company. They franchise the word Sotheby's Realty to other brokerages. That's all that they do. And they also reference the Andy Yan report. Now, the Andy Yan report, I think we talked about before. It basically reviewed, had a flawed methodology that resolved if you were someone with a Chinese name living in Vancouver, and you bought a house, and your name looked like it came from old world China, they were going to count you as a foreign buyer. They only looked at one half of the transactions they recorded. They only looked at the buyer's name. They didn't look at the seller's names of all the properties that they reported on. If they had simply looked at the seller's names, they would have found out that a large majority of the count that they had sold a previous home that they owned and purchased a new one. So it was irrelevant to the study. The study also had to take into consideration everyone who sold a property in Vancouver, so that, again, you could cross-reference the names to make sure that you were not calling a Canadian citizen a foreign buyer. But, of course, Mr. Yan's report did not do that because he basically looked at land titles for a couple of properties. Your 10-year-old nephew could have done the same thing.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
Unbelievable harmonies, spectacular performance, the ultimate tribute to the Everly Brothers and Simon and Garfunkel. Bird Dog and the Vintage Electric Band, Saturday, January 9th at the Alex Goulden Hall. Buy online and save at ontourtickets.com. See singing impressionist Andre Philippe Gagnon.
And I think to myself,
In Oliver, December 29th. In Kelowna, December 30th. Buy online and save at ontourtickets.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking to realty consultant Ross Kay. Well, CMHC says we need more information. We got our numbers by talking to property managers or condo councils who don't really have the resources to find out, where are you from? Where did you get your money? Why are you using it? But here's what's flawed, according to you, is that CMHC does have access to very, very accurate numbers about where you're from, where you got your money, and what you're buying, but they're not using it.
That's correct, Jim. If you look at the CMHC research, it's published on their website portal, and then you do the calculations. What CMHC just said was 29% of all resale condos purchased in Vancouver CMA in the last 12 months took place from foreign buyers. CMHC just told you, when you go through their numbers, 29% of all of the sales that took place with members of the Vancouver Real Estate Board, Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board, came from foreign buyers. If that is true, Jim, that equates to about 3,360 purchases. There should have been 3,360 FINTRAC forms completed and submitted to the federal government for a suspicious transaction by the realtors who sold those properties. In Toronto, there was 3,623 CMHC is suggesting took place, and all of those forms needed to be completed by the realtors and submitted to the federal government. All CMHC had to do was call up FINTRAC, the other government body, and ask them, the one that has to do with money laundering, and ask them to supply the names of the people, the FINTRAC forms that were reported for those transactions. Your premier out there, she could do the exact same thing, and all of this would be debunked. Your mayor of Vancouver, all he has to do is request these forms or the answers, and it could be debunked. The Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, all they have to do is say, our members completed these many forms. The problem is, Jim, the second CMHC calls for those FINTRAC forms to be tabulated. They don't have to break any privacy laws. All they have to do is, all we want to know is, if you got 1,000 forms, how many were foreign buyers? Well, all of a sudden, you've got, over 7,000 transactions in Canada, just in those two cities alone, just on condos, where the real estate agents are in big, big trouble. Because I know they did not fill out those forms. So the information's available, Jim. It takes an intelligent, a bit of market intelligence about how the home selling infrastructure works in Canada, which Ross Kay Realty Consultants would freely provide. We are on the record informing CMHC, the Minister of Finance, StatsCan, and the Bank of Canada that all they have to do is ask for these FINTRAC forms. We are still sitting here now, almost 12 months since our intelligence was passed on to those bodies. They still have not requested those forms to be completed. So this renders the housing market insight on foreign buyers useless unless you're going to accept 29% of all sales took place in Vancouver condos to foreign buyers. And if that's the case, Jim, if you have almost 30% market share in Vancouver, then you have a major, major political mess on your hands. I would not want to be a government where 30% of the sales were recorded by foreign buyers in my municipality.
Why do you think the CMHC is not releasing the real numbers?
They're not releasing them, Jim, because I know how absurd this sounds, but how real estate markets function is something that's not understood by economists and housing analysts today. So when you read all of these things in the newspaper, all of these comments, you'll notice one thing in common. None of it is backed up by a statistical number. It's all just ideas, opinions, thoughts, what we think. Always claims that there's not enough data. Well, if there wasn't enough data, Ross Kay Realty Consultants wouldn't have said back a year earlier, July of 2014, that the Calgary real estate market was correcting. We wouldn't have been on CBC News in December telling people that the housing prices were going to plummet in Calgary. We wouldn't have come out last week and said, the little tiny decrease they're telling you about in Calgary right now, that's really not true. It's actually 10% higher than what they're telling you, and maybe 12% higher. You do not have people in positions who have a basic understanding how housing markets function. I'll give you a quick reference if it's okay. Picture a pond. It's a beautifully flat pond. There's not a wind, not a wind rippling anywhere. Around that pond, there's a sand beach. Someone takes a pebble and throws it into the middle of the pond. That pebble creates ripples, and that wave runs right out until it hits the beach. That's exactly how a real estate market operates. If someone threw in an extra 3,360 pebbles into the Vancouver real estate pond of real estate, those numbers would show up in the sales data. Those numbers do not show up. What we have consistently said is only possible as of so far this year, 2.8% of the sales in Vancouver, technically speaking, could be counted to foreign buyers. But we also know that when we say that potential will be eliminated, a large amount of that potential will be eliminated in the next 3 months as those sales, the ripples in the pond, hit the beach. What CMHC is doing is they're counting they think they can count pebbles that are being thrown into the pond. You can't count pebbles without knowing what the consequence of what that wave is, because maybe there was no pebble. Maybe it was just the wind blowing the wave. And now you're counting, thinking that there was a pebble thrown in, and it was just the wind. That's how easy a real estate market is to interpret. So your listeners, they're buying REIT. They're wondering about housing market investments. Should I make an investment? Should I buy or sell? There are all black and white issues to this that are fully supported with statistical proof. Not evidence, proof. Real estate markets can function in one way, and one way only, and barring that there's an earthquake and we lose 100,000 properties in Vancouver into a sinkhole, these housing markets always flow out the same way.
Ross, do you have a theory about why the CMHC is revising their reports, renaming their reports? Why is that?
Well, now, so you're the first person who's brought that up. Since the Liberal government was elected, CMHC immediately, anybody can go back and check the dates on these items. This is not, just do a Google search. Immediately upon the Liberals moving into power and the Conservatives being removed, CMHC started to undertake a revision of all of their documents, information, name of products. Now, none of this was discussed during the election that this was going to take place. It only took place after the Conservatives were kicked out. Okay, so what happened while the Conservatives were in power? They were giving housing intelligence from CMHC. Housing intelligence, which was flawed. Housing intelligence that counted 25,000 sales in a CMA and reported them as 32,000 sales. CMHC has admitted to me that they understand the housing information they have is flawed, yet they don't put that disclaimer in their reports. They understand that they're getting their information third, fourth, fifth hand, and they don't really know what they're getting, but they throw their hands up in the air and say, that's what we get, so that's what we report.
So in other words, they're covering their butts.
Right. So we have the house price analysis framework, analysis and assessment. That was released last November of 2014. It has only been, and it talked about housing overvaluation of homes in Canada. That's what it was brought out for. Fears of the housing bubble. So CMHC says we'll do this report. Immediately after the Liberals got elected, they rebranded that product. It was not even a year old. They dropped the word price from it. It is now called the Housing Market Assessment. So you can go on the CMHC website, you can see Housing Market Assessment, and then you can pull up HPAA, House Price Analysis and Assessment, which was the year-old new publication that they brought out. The word price now has been eliminated. So the main reason it was created was to calm fears of overvaluations. Now they've removed the word price. You'll see their housing market tables in Housing Now have all been revised. This has all taken place since the election.
So Ross, so in other words, when they said 5.4% of Vancouver's condo sales were to foreigners, the real number from information that's available to them should be closer to 29%.
No, what I'm saying is, what they're saying is, it's 29%. So if you look at it, Jim, if you look at the report.
But their report said 5.4%.
I know, but what did it say for the previous year? So you see.
3.5.
This is what people don't understand about, this is what I shake my head at when all these housing analysis, economists, all these supposed experts about housing talk. They said Vancouver CMA in 2014 had 2.3% of the condo apartments were owned by foreign residents. This year, they said it's 3.5%. In other words, it has increased 1.2%. So Vancouver CMA, the owners of condo apartments have increased 1.2%. When you do the math, that's 3,360 new foreign owners. Those sales, because the way that the survey was calculated, were all resales. They talked to condo managers, the same ones they talked to last year. That's what it says in their report. So that means last year, CMHC is saying 3,360 sales in Vancouver CMA for resale condo apartments were to foreign buyers. You haven't read that in the newspaper anywhere. You have not read that in a housing release anywhere. That's just simple math, which is when I go back to say housing markets all evolve in the exact same way. They can't evolve anywhere, any other way, unless you have a whole bunch of vacant houses all over the place. And I don't mean these one or two vacants that are talked about in expensive areas of Vancouver.
But Ross, what I'm trying to get here is a clear picture. Is the foreign ownership much bigger than CMHC is saying?
What I'm saying, Jim, is this. CMHC just told everybody in Vancouver that 29% of all condo sales last year went to foreign buyers. That's what CMHC just told you. They can't provide you any proof because it was a survey, but they just told you 29% of all your buyers were foreign buyers. What I'm telling you is that's hogwash. It is absurd. And if it did happen, then you've got about 3,000 real estate agents in Vancouver who could be charged by the federal government for failing to complete a FinTrack form on a suspicious transaction. You probably have about 150, 200 broker owners who right now should be shaking in their boots because the federal government comes knocking, asking for these forms. It's jail time, Jim. This is not a joke. It is a massive fine, and now I'm sure they're never going to do it, but the legislation has up to 1 year in jail. So are you not going to fill out a form because you're afraid of saying that someone you're selling a house to is a foreign buyer? You're going to risk jail time for that? Of course not. So for that reason, there is a problem with how things are being interpreted in Vancouver, Toronto, across Canada, and the problem resides in there's a disconnect between how the housing market infrastructure operates and the knowledge of those who are making commentary over the housing market infrastructure. CMHC claims to be the authority on housing. They're not the authority on housing. They can't tell you what a housing bubble is. They can't tell you how the average sale price in Vancouver naturally inflate. These concepts aren't taught to them at school, so they can't give those answers. That's where your problem is.
So CMHC should rip up this report and use the real numbers and then give us something that's a lot more accurate.
Yeah, what I would, in all fairness, from what I see today, the best thing for CMHC to do would be to call up my dad, who's 78, sitting in a lawn chair up on Manitoulin Island in Northern Ontario, a man who sold over 3,000 houses himself. And they should ask him his opinion on what they're releasing, because he's going to laugh at them, Jim. All they're releasing is propaganda that the real estate board. You understand, in Vancouver last month, Jim, you had over 72% of all the houses that were listed for sale did not sell. So this hot housing market that the real estate agents are telling everybody exists, they're letting their buyers enter bidding wars, paying over asking price or paying asking price. Over 72% of all the houses that were listed for sale in Vancouver last month didn't sell. That's the truth. It's using Vancouver's own numbers. It's just that it's reported to the public in a different manner. So instead of being reported to the public so that the buyers can make an informed decision, it's reported to the public so that sellers can get more for their house. That's why you get housing bubbles. That's how the system works. It's just the way it works. CMHC should be stepping back and saying, wait a second, we want to create a stable housing market in Canada. That is their mission. That's what I was told by CMHC themselves. They want to have a stable housing market. Okay, then you need to start representing both the seller side and the buyer side with equal respect. You've got to tell buyers in Vancouver, 73% of the homes that you're going to look at today will not sell this month. Now, if you want to, knowing only 27% are going to sell, if you want to pay asking price or you want to enter a bidding war, hey, go ahead and do it. What I'm telling you is only less than 3 in 10 houses are going to sell. That's why your average selling price goes up. Because what 3 in 10 sell, Jim?
The best 3 houses.
The best 3 houses. Those houses represent a small percentage of the houses that are out there. But those are the houses that always sell. This month they sell, the next 3 out of 10 sell the next month, and the next month, and the next. And even when the market's correcting, like Calgary, it's still only the best houses that are selling, which is why the average selling price fools the public. It's why the real estate board's numbers fool the public. Toronto just reported they're going to have a huge record number of sales this year. Well, what Toronto's not telling anybody was back in 2009, they actually reported more sales in November than they did this year, but they claimed that this year's was a record, and they're not going to tell anybody how much bigger Toronto is this year than it was back in 2009 or 2007. And when you make all the proper adjustments for the numbers, the housing market in Toronto is not busy at all. It's slow, which is why less than 75% of their homes aren't selling. It's just the way it is.
Ross, how can people find out more about Ross K Realty Consultants?
Well, RossK.com is our corporate website. Because of the state of the situation and what we've learned over the last 4 years, we will be coming out with consumer products. Right now, we are focused on the corporate environment, the investor environment, so they can get some unbiased, real-world market intelligence for the first time. We've just released a report last week that explained how the Bank of Canada's interest rate drop in January of 2015 actually immediately caused the housing bubble to accelerate. We also are working on right now CMHC's overvaluation, telling everybody last month that Vancouver was okay, they weren't overvalued, and then how it reacted to an immediate spike in sales already recorded in Vancouver. We also have a new report being released next week, which it'll take the regular consumer a couple of months before they hear about it, but we know that the banks right now in Canada, they are in serious problems with their uninsured mortgages because they're using the Terranet National Bank House Price Index to determine the loan-to-value ratios of their uninsured mortgage portfolios. There's over $400 billion held in those portfolios, Jim. And by our calculations, the average loan-to-value ratio that they are giving, it means that their entire portfolio should be insured with CMHC. The reason it's not, because they're using the Terranet National Bank Home Price Index, and we're demystifying those misrepresentative measures as well.
Ross, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
My guest has been Ross K from Ross K Realty Consultants. His website, rossk.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. You can forward comments about the show to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Gondard.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.